Miles Errant by Lois McMaster Bujold is the fourth omnibus novel. This one, it's pretty large. It's like 700 plus pages. It took me 2 weeks to read because of the pacing, but let's get into the breakdown of the story. Our story begins with a novella called Borders of Infinity. It's the best part of the book. It is a story about Miles being put into a Setagandan prison camp for an undercover mission. However, the mission goes sour and he finds himself maybe trapped there forever with deteriorating circumstances and a terrible microcosm that's sort of built itself around the way the Setagandans are sort of committing human rights violations in this camp. So that's the best part of the novel to begin, and it's a novella. So that's the reason why it took me a really long time to read this book. The second part is called Brothers in Arms. It is a novel. It's about Miles taking a furlough on planet Earth, and he's having troubles juggling his two personas. He's Miles Naismith, the admiral of the Dendari mercenaries, but he's also Lord Miles Vorkosigan. So the news crews start circling, vultures go around, and then he finds himself going up against a clone of himself, and a plot to use him to strike a heart at the heart of Barayar. So the second one was a little bit pedestrian, interesting twists, new developments in character, but it was very pedestrian. And then the third part of the book is the longest, the one I had trouble getting through the most, called Mirror Dance. It takes place 2 years after Brothers in Arms, and it's the return of Mark Vorkosigan, the clone of Miles. So he basically pretends to be Miles in order to do a very dangerous mission on Jackson's Hole. So we get a lot more world building, but this story just takes way too long to get started. It's mostly the third novel, part of the book, the novel, is mostly a Mark story, so it's more focused on him as a character. So it definitely shafts Miles a little bit. A lot more world building and stuff going on. A lot of pretty violent events too. A lot more action involved, but I just didn't dig the story because I guess it doesn't really love it because Miles takes a back seat. I also didn't like Ethan of Athos because they did the same thing. But overall, yeah, this one was definitely not probably my least favorite omnibus collection out of all of them so far. Compared to the other three, I consider the first two masterpieces. The third one was a 3 out of 5 for me. So this one, I'm gonna have to give it a 2.5 out of 5, just because I really did not dig the full-size novel stories. They weren't that interesting. The first one was great though, like the novella at the beginning to start. So that's why it probably took me for a loop, because it started off really strong, and then the second and third one were equally long, and then Mirror Dance took forever to finish. I usually read about 100 pages a day, so I should have had this book down in about a week, but it took me like 2 weeks. So yeah, 2.5 out of 5. Memory by Lois McMaster Bujold is the 10th novel of the Vorkosigan Saga. I couldn't find this book on hardcover or print or anything like that, so I had to listen to it on audiobook. It was my first audiobook ever. Very interesting experience, 14 hours. But essentially, this is a coming-of-age story for Miles. It is a very important novel in the scheme of things. Miles has a new thing to deal with health-wise while he's doing some downtime on Barayar. And then in the second half turns into like a espionage mystery because something happens to his mentor, Simon Ilian. So the first half of this story is basically almost like a clip show, a sort of like recap. We get a lot of throwbacks and references to other characters that Miles has met throughout this time. It's also his birthday. He'll be turning 30. So while he's dealing with all this sort of nostalgia stuff, he's also having to deal with a major change in his career. And then also, having to deal with becoming involved in this internal matter with his mentor. So Memory starts off kind of slow, to be honest. I wasn't really enjoying it to begin with, but then finally when they start introducing the mystery elements for the second half, I got more interested. But this is also, a very emotional and character growth journey story that's really really gets to the heart and meat and bones of the character. So there's a lot of changes physically and mentally and emotionally So Memory is a very interesting read. It's definitely a must read. You can't just skip it because you can't find it. You gotta try to find it because it's very instrumental going forward. I noticed something weird that the next few omnibus stories are actually out of order. The next one is Miles, Mutants and Microbes. That one collects a prequel story, novella that I've already read, and then a story that takes place later on called Diplomatic Immunity. So the next one to read would be Miles in Love, which has two novels and a novella. So I'll be looking forward to finishing off those last few stories, and then there's only about 10 more novels, I think, total that I have to read to finish off the Vorkosigan Saga. So I'm definitely looking forward to that, and I give Memory a 3 out of 5.